everybody, and welcome to your lesson for Thursday, April 16th. Happy you're back. Hopefully you've already seen part 1 of this week's week 4 video, which is about the rise of the European feudal system, because we're going to be building on that today. Part 2. Let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and go full screen. We're talking about power in the feudal system. And I want to refer you to this image here because you're going to be seeing this image a lot. Ask questions in your mind about this image. Who do you think the people are at the bottom? Who are those people in the middle? And who are those people at the top? If you did the last lesson, you should probably have an idea of who belongs where, because it looks like there's almost a most important person, a kind of important person, and some people that maybe are not important. You tell me. Before you move on to the next part of this video, I want you to have a guess in your mind of who is who. Your lesson objective. Similar to what you went over to in part 1, you're still going to be reading and listening to a Google Slides presentation, and you'll be able to answer questions about the social structure of Europe in the early Middle Ages on Schoology. First step, video and the slides. You might have to watch the video twice or go through the slides on your own. The second, pay attention to those checks for your understanding, because I'm going to be previewing the questions that you're going to find here on Schoology. Once you're done with this video, you should be ready to go ahead and do the assessment on Schoology. Our essential question for today: who holds the most power in society? I want you to think big. Don't just think about medieval Europe here. Who do you think holds the most power in our society today? There's no wrong answer. I just want you to have an answer in your head, because you will have to answer this essential question. Think about it before you move on to the next slide. Pause if you have to. We're talking about power in the feudal system. I want you to take a close look at this manor. This is a picture, an artist's depiction of how a medieval manor might have looked. The manor is where the king would live, where the nobles would live. This is the area that the knights fought to protect. This is where the serfs and the peasants would work the land. See if you can identify who lives where just by looking. You probably guessed that the person that lives here is pretty important, a king. And the people that live in these small huts, probably less important, serfs. And look, they're really close to the fields because you know that's their main responsibility. There's also this church. Believe it or not, everybody was required to go to church. Religion was a huge part of even the serf's lifestyle. It was an expectation. Of course, you were going to go to church. And then we look at these roads, one leading up to these main gates with a moat around a castle to protect from any possible invaders. And we also have someone patrolling these roads here. Person looks like one of those people that might be protecting the land, or maybe just watching over it. We don't really know. Let's find out more about what manors were like in the Middle Ages. Okay, so let's look at the anatomy of a feudal state. The word anatomy, we're talking about how something is made. Talking about how a feudal estate, or also a manor, is made. How did it work? How is it constructed? And who had the most power here? Because we're still talking about power here. First things first, let's look at our photo. We see roads and we see a lot of knights. Strategic placement of roads and castles made the manor more easily defendable. So we see the knights were the ones patrolling the roads. Here, we see the serfs. We see them outside of this castle here. Serfs worked in the land in the shadow of the manor house or castle. Manors or estates were self-sufficient. What that word self-sufficient means is that they provided for themselves. They didn't have to go out and get things. It's kind of like right now, we're all spending a lot of time at home, right? So if you're spending a lot of time at home, you might have to, not maybe not you, because you guys have a sweet deal. A lot of you guys don't have to go run errands and things like that. Sometimes you do. Cool if you do. But a lot of the time, somebody has to go out and get more food because not many people have their own garden in the backyard where they can grow enough food and enough different types of food where they don't even have to go out, right? So manors were different because they were self-sufficient. That means they had everything they needed inside. A serf was usually responsible for planting, for gathering, for turning grain into bread. It was always somebody's job because we're in a feudal system. And if everybody did their job right, then you didn't have to go outside of the manor. Because it's dangerous out there. Remember, there's still a lot of invasion and a lot of fighting. You don't want to be outside those manor walls. Let's continue looking at the anatomy of the feudal estate or the manor. Okay, so we already know the manor was the lord's residence where the lords lived. They were built to protect the lord's vassals. In some cases, there were walls built around all of the lord's land, so he could withstand a siege for a long span. That means if somebody's trying to invade them for a long period of time, trying to attack them, they built the walls outside of the manor for protection. Serfs had huts or houses and their own gardens for survival. So they had to grow their own food on top of the food supply for the entire manor, because otherwise they would probably starve with the amount of taxes and food that they had to turn over to the nobles and to those above them in the feudal system. So keep in mind, we're still talking about power. If you're thinking of these knights here, these serfs here, and whoever might live here, probably a lord, right? Who do you think had the most power? Let's not forget the Pope. So here, I'm not going to read this to you because you can do this on your own. Remember, we're still talking about power and who had the most power in society, in this society. If you remember from our last lesson, the Pope is at the highest point of our feudal system. He has the most power in this social structure. So I want you to read and find out more about his role here. By the time you're done reading, you should be able to answer the questions at the very end of this presentation. So read this closely. It's very short. I'm moving on to the next slide. Continue reading, and this will be the end of this article. Okay, so notice I don't stay very long on one slide because you have the ability to pause, to go back, to go forward, and to review these slides after the video is over. I'm going to go over the big ideas with you one more time for week 4. Keep in mind, the feudal system was necessary because it provided protection and stability during a dangerous time. Why was it dangerous? Because we have Germanic tribes, we have Vikings, we have people fighting for power, fighting for land outside those manor walls, and you did not want to be outside those manor walls during this time. Second, the Pope had even more power than the kings in the feudal system, and by this time, you should be able to tell me why that is. Why were they viewed as such powerful beings? Why were they at the top of the social structure during this time? Okay, last, the feudal system only works if everyone does their job. Everyone in this structure has a job to do, and the system could fall apart if someone is not doing their job. All right, so we're going to do some check for understanding questions, and I'm going to review them with you to make sure the questions make sense. And if at any part you're confused or something doesn't make sense to you, office hours, definitely attend. Or shoot me a text on Remind. That's the quickest way to get an answer. But if you can't do any of those things, you can always ask your question on Schoology. That's 3 different ways to get in touch with me if you need something. Remind is the fastest, but either way, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Let's go over a check for understanding. So the first thing you will be asked to do on Schoology is to match the social role with the appropriate place or thing. Green with orange. Let's take a look at this one. Lords. Would they match with defendable roads, lands, or fields, huts, manor house, or castle walls? Figure out which one of these roles would match appropriately, which one goes with which? Now, some of these answers might be confusing, but you're going to find the best answer. This is one of those times where we really have to think, use process of elimination, and find the best answer. You can use these more than once. It's one of these roles that matches with this place or thing. The power of the Pope. Read the article and you should be able to tell me 3 reasons the Catholic Pope gained so much power. How did they get to be so powerful anyway? Why do you think popes and kings often argued? Be prepared to explain that answer. Go back to the reading if you're not sure about the answers to these questions. And then that brings us to our essential question. Who holds the most power in society? I want your general response. You could think about life today. Who do you think actually holds the most power? Then I want you to bring your thinking back to history. Who held the most power under the feudal system and why? Explain with supporting evidence. The answer might be very clear to you, like, oh, I already know who holds the most power. I already know. But now you have to support that. Now, supporting evidence can be found in this presentation, in the previous lesson, or in Chapter 2, Lesson 4 of your green textbook. So go ahead and turn to that if you're feeling like, I don't remember this, Miss Hickman, I don't know who had the power. With that, you're ready to finish off your assignment for week 4. So go to Schoology under week 4 instructions and complete the assessment. And again, if you have a quick question, you can always send a text using Remind. Some questions that will be difficult for me to answer on email, you might have to go to office hours and get your answer there. Speaking of office hours, I'm going to go over those with you one more time. My office hours are Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and they are during these times. I will have a link posted on Schoology for Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday office hours. The meeting will happen on Zoom and it will not start until I'm in the meeting. So you can click on the link all you want. Nothing's going to happen until I get there. So please make sure that you're trying to log on during the right time on the right day. So that way we can get in touch with one another. But by Friday, make sure you turn in your Schoology assessment each week. I'm going to try to keep it on Friday. Okay, so please make sure you get that done. Any questions? Let me know. Miss you guys. Bye-bye.